Welcome to Behind the Logics, the repository of knowledge. Today we are going to see about control statements, range functions, in that we will be seeing about looping statements and loop control statements. Let's see one by one. First, we will be seeing about control statements. When we need to make decisions, repeat executions, or pass and skip the execution of certain statements in the Python program, we go for control statements. Various keywords are used for various purposes. We'll get to know about them in detail in this video. Let's see about if-else. There may be situations where a decision needs to be taken based on some conditions. We use if-else block to specify our conditions. If block is used to check for a particular condition. When the condition is true, the statements inside if block will be executed. If not, else block will be executed. Let us see an example for this. Let me type a is equal to 5. If a is greater than 4, and I'm using indentation inside the if block to print a is greater than 4, and outside if I'm printing print outside if and run the code. So I got the output as a is greater than 4 and outside if. It is just a simple if statement. Now I'm changing the value of a as 3, which is not greater than 4, but still the output is printed as outside if. Why? Whether if condition works or not, outside if will be printed as it is not inside the if block. To be inside the if block, the print statement should be written with indentation, that is with space. So when I change the a value to 3, we got outside if in the output. Next, let's see an example for else block. So the same example as a is equal to 3. If a is greater than 4, print a is greater than 4. Else, I have added the else block. Else, print a is not greater than 4. It's as simple as that. And let's run the code. We got our output as a is not greater than 4. As the condition inside the if statement is not true, else block has been executed here. Now let's see about Alif block. We can use Alif block when there are multiple conditions to be checked. Let us see an example for this. The same statements, I'm just adding here an Alif block which checks if the value of a is equal to 4. So print a is equal to 4 and run the code. As the first two conditions are not true, it prints the else block. We can check as many conditions as we want with the help of elif statements. We can also use nested if statements, that is if within if when needed. So let's see an example for this. I'm typing a is equal to 10. If a is greater than 2, print above 2. And within if, I'm writing another if. If a is greater than 5, print also above 5. Else, print not above 5. Let's run the code. We got our output as above 2, also above 5. As if statements are true, it doesn't go to else block. Let me explain how the nested if worked here. The value of a, which we defined, is 10. The first if is true as it is greater than 2, so it prints above 2. It then goes into the next if and checks if the value of a is greater than 5. As this condition is also true, it then prints also above 5. We can also use the logical operators like and, or in the if statements. Let me give you some examples for this. So let me type a is equal to 300 and B is equal to 20 and C is equal to 500. If A is greater than B and B is greater than C, print both are true. And we are using Alif block here. If A is greater than B or B is greater than C, print at least one of the conditions is true. So, and run the code. We got our output. So, if both the conditions are true, AND statement will be true. If any one of the condition is true, OR statement will be true. When we check the if conditions, it is evident that the output is at least one of the conditions is true. So, the elif statement with OR checks if either of the conditions is true. Next, we'll be seeing about shorthand if. If you have only one statement to execute in the if block, you can put it on the same line as the if statement. If you have only one statement to execute, that is one for if and one for else, you can put it all in the same line. And that is called shorthand if else. Let me give you some examples for shorthand if and shorthand if else. Let me type A is equal to 5. If A is greater than 4, print A is greater than 4. This is similar to our first example but written in one line. Let me run the code and we got our output. Next we will see an example for shorthand if else. Print greater if A is greater than 4, else print lesser, and let's run the code and we got our output as greater. Next we will see about range functions. If you need to iterate over a sequence of numbers, the built-in function range is used. It generates arithmetic progressions. It has syntax of range: start, stop, step. It is necessary to specify the stop value. The other arguments are optional. The loop will be executed for stop minus 1 times. Start is nothing but where we want to start our sequence, and stop is the end value. Step is the number of values to be incremented or decremented. It can be negative also. The default start value is 0 and step value is 1. Let's see some examples for the same. Let me type for I in range. Within the argument I have given the value of 5. So it prints a sequence of values from 0 to 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5 values we have got. And let us print list range 5, 10, and let's run the code and we got our output 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So we can also generate a list with the help of range function. Here the list value starts from 5, ends with 9 with an increment of 1 per value. It stops with 9 because the end value will always be stop minus 1. Let's see another example. Print list range of 0, 10, 3 and run the code and we got our output here. We have created a list with the start value as 0, incremented by 3 every time till it reaches the value 9. As the stop value is 10, it checks the condition and stops in 9. Let's see another example. Let me give a string value for A, like some A is equal to behind the logics. For I in range len, len, it means it defines the size of the list A. So print I, A of I, and let's run the code. The index and the corresponding value in the list are printed. So we can also access the list values with the help of range function to find how many elements are there in the list. Next, let's see about looping statements. Looping statements are used to iterate through a sequence or perform an action for multiple times. Loops are of two types in Python: for loop, while loop. We use for loop for iterating over a sequence such as a list, a tuple, a dictionary, a set, or a string. We should know the number of iterations beforehand in order to use a for loop. We can access a value with the help of an index or access element by element in the sequence. Let us see some examples now. We have used here the exact same example we used before in range function. Here we are iterating through the list using index values with the help of range function. Next, let me type A is equal to behind the logics. I'm using for loop here. For I in A, print I, and let's run the code. And we got our output. We are printing the values of the tuple by accessing it element by element. It will access the whole list sequentially. Here we don't need to specify the number of iterations beforehand. Next, let me type A is equal to behind the logics for I in A, print I, and let's run the code. We got our output. We can also iterate over a string with the help of for loop. Next, let's see about while loop. While loop is used to execute a block of statements repeatedly until a given condition is satisfied. And when the condition becomes false, the line immediately after the loop is executed. We don't have to specify the number of iterations earlier. We should specify the increment or decrement condition in the loop. Also, the loop variable should be defined before the start of the loop. If the increment or decrement is not specified, the loop will execute forever. It never ends. We can go with while loop if the number of iterations is not known. Let us see some examples now. Let me type I is equal to 1 and I'm using while loop here. While I is less than 6, print I is equal to I plus 1. That's what it means. Let's run the code. And we got our output here. Here we are printing the values 1 to 5. I is initialized to 1 and has been incremented by 1 every time. So let me give you another example. The same statement I'm using here, but I'm using an else statement for while. We can also use else statement along with while. It can be used to specify that the condition fails. Else statements can be used with for loops as well. So now print I is no more less than 6 and let's run the code. So it printed till 5 and when it comes to 6, it checks the condition and runs the else statement. I is no more lesser than 6. Let me give you one more example. The same statement, I'm printing behind the logics for the same statement. Okay, let's run the code. And it prints behind the logics for 5 times. As I is less than 6, it stops in 5. Next, let's see about loop control statements. There may be times when we need to exit the loop completely or skip a specific iteration. In those cases, we go for loop control statements. First we'll see about break. Break statement is used to break out the innermost for or while statement. When we want to bring the control out of the loop on a specific condition, we use break statement. Let's see an example for this. Let me type A is equal to behind the logics for I in A if I is equal to C or some other letter, whatever you want. Nope. Sorry. Break and print I. Let's run the code. So we got our output. We have stated that the loop should be broken when the value of I is C. So this program will print till behind the log G and C will not be printed as it is broken there. Next we'll see about continue statement. Continue statement is used to stop the current iteration and continue with the next iteration. When we want to skip an iteration on a specific condition, we use continue statement. Let me show you an example for this. Let me type the same as A is equal to behind the logics for I in A. If I is equal to L, continue and print I. Let's run the code. Here our output is. Here we have used continue statement to skip the printing of L in the given program. So it prints all other letters except L. We'll see about pass statement. Pass statement does nothing. It is used as a placeholder. When the user doesn't know what to write inside a particular block, then pass statement can be used. Let me give you an example for this. Let us type def my function pass and let's run the code. A is equal to behind the logics for I in A if I is equal to C. Pass. Else print I. Let's run the code and we got our output. So this is an empty function which does nothing. So here if I is equal to C, pass, which means when I is C, just skip. That is what it means. And in the output, you can notice that C in logics is skipped. So that's all for today's video. I hope this video will be very useful for you. For more videos, do subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you won't miss our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.